Welcome, everybody, to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Bruen, and I just want to welcome you all to a very special Sci-Fi week, brought to you by All Access Entertainment. Now, we've got over a week of over a dozen special guests from the Star Wars franchise. Very excited to release this to you, the fans, and thank you so much for all of your support. We have lots of great in-depth interviews throughout this week, coming up with many of the stars of Star Wars, whether it be on-screen roles or behind the scenes, and you're going to hear stories you've never heard. So thank you again so much for tuning in here all week for All Access Entertainment and for the Star Wars, of course, Sci-Fi Week. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment and remember Barry Holland. We lost Barry Holland not long ago, a great Star Wars actor, of course, Lieutenant Ren's You Rebel Scum. And it's a pleasure to have known him and become friends with him over the years. Knew Barry for many years. And, like I said, unfortunately, we lost him. But I do want to take a moment and remember him, because we can't have a Star Wars-themed sci-fi week here on the All Access Entertainment Podcast without remembering Barry, in my opinion. So, Barry Holland, this week is for you. And fans, this week is also for you. So get ready. It's going to be a special week, and it's a pleasure to bring it all to you. And without further ado, let's kick it all off with Anthony Forrest. Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and as we continue Sci-Fi Week, we once again have a very special guest from the Star Wars franchise and beyond. He's done so much. He's an accomplished actor. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Forrest, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Really enjoy being here. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here and take a little deep dive into everything that you've been a part of. And you've done some really great things. So looking forward to this.
Yeah.
So rewinding a little bit, growing up as a kid, what were some of the, either young adult or child, some of the first films that you remember watching and being introduced to, and what were some of your hobbies?
Okay. In terms of film, my mom was a big film fan. And we're going to go back to the time when they used to have the late shows, late movies, most of them on black and white on terrestrial television. And I was the one who was prepared to sit up late. One is a way of maybe not missing this morning school or missing something, and just watch the movies along with my mom and enjoy just, being engulfed in those old black and white movies. It's not hard for anybody if you actually spend the time to become a Marx Brothers fan, for instance.
Sure.
And I love the old, I like the Cagney films. I like, there was just such a wealth of that historical era out of Hollywood, because they were churning out a lot of productions. They had an awful lot of great people who are working in the various genres and things like that. Some really, composers. These were some of the composers. The scores were some of the best composers around.
Yeah.
And the writers. If you look at the list sometimes of the writers that were working in Hollywood and on the big films and that, these were great. Not Ernest Hemingway. People like that were working on some of these projects, and so it was really a great platform to and it was really about being able to hang out with my dad had already gone because he was always getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning for work and things like that. And so it was an opportunity for me to hang out with my mom and just have the opportunity to kind of absorb all of these great films. Yeah. And all of these great performances. I mean, there's just such a wealth of fantastic performances with a great wealth of wonderful writing in that period as well.
Sure. And, we kind of talked a little bit about it off camera. What's your take on the digital age and how we've kind of, lost the physical media for the most part? Some things are starting to maybe make a comeback. What's your take on that right now?
I think really what we're seeing, especially in the context of streaming, I think we're seeing it's a little bit of a money grab, in the sense that, oh, hang on a second, we can put this out onto streaming on the internet, and we can still charge all of these fees on a monthly basis. And but I don't think I don't often think that the corporations are working on behalf of the consumers.
Right.
They're working on behalf of themselves and the shareholders. That's their mandate.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that the consumers they're not fighting back. They're just reclaiming what the consumers recognize as the value, and that's to have a home library.
Sure.
That's to have your vinyl. That's to have your CDs. People are even collecting VHS cassettes. They're collecting uh, audio cassettes. These were all technologies that many of the you know many in the industry would like to have seen long gone.
Yeah.
But the actual marketplace is recognizing the value in these things because, in the same way we collect very old paintings from 400 years ago, 500 years ago, or we collect artifacts and that, people are recognizing all of these things have a value because it's not even about their shelf life. It's about the fact that there is a lot of quality material there that it's nice to have at your leisure, at your home, and not having. I've heard some people talk about the fact that if they have a streaming service and they have a library in the streaming service, all of a sudden their library disappears or those titles are no longer available.
Right. Exactly.
And and so what is what are you paying for? What are you investing in? Whereas investing in the DVDs and the Blu-rays and investing in the vinyl even the CDs are coming back to a large extent. One, because of quality across all of those platforms, and two, because let's have a night where we're going to watch a bunch of Star Wars films together,
Yeah.
and you're not and also now we're being put at the mercy of the fact that now you're going to get ads unless you pay more.
Right. Ads, that's a whole other monster for sure. And, here in
Uh,
my house, I mean, Halloween or Christmas time or whatever it may be, we do the countdowns with the kids. So we have different films that we watch every year. And it's nice to just be able to pull it off of a shelf and pop it in, and the kids can choose which one they want to watch on what specific night, where you have to have
yeah,
6, 7 paid services to navigate where those films are otherwise.
and even if they're still there when you want to watch them, yeah.
Right,
And
exactly.
that's the beauty of it, is the fact that you have control of your library.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think maybe the studios didn't figure this out when they were trying to do all of these new adventures that they're doing, is they missed the point, is the fact that they base their economy or their ability to make new productions on the value of their total library. So if they've got, say, 5,000 titles in their library, that is what they use to leverage the loans that they need to make new productions. That's one of the aspects. It's the same like owning land. It's an asset base that they hold on to. And so I think what the fans in that are realizing is, hang on a second, now we have the asset base. We've
Yeah.
got the library, and you can't take it away from us because it's sitting on our shelf. It's not yours
Yeah.
anymore. You sold it to us. We bought it. We're not trying to restream it, but we're going to definitely have our friends over, and we're all going to sit around. Maybe they'll figure out a way they're going to charge you for doing that. I don't know.
They might, yeah. Hopefully,
Yeah,
we're not around when that happens, but
yeah, yeah,
I'm sure it's coming. So,
yeah,
fast forward a little bit, 1977. What everybody thinks is a very small film just kind of pops up, a very small budget. Nobody knows, that this is going to become one of the biggest franchises, worldwide. Um, and it's called Star Wars. So, Star Wars
right,
pops up 1977. You play a sand trooper, of course, with, honestly, in my opinion, some of the most famous lines in the franchise. These aren't the droids you're looking for, and move along, move along. I mean, that's such an iconic,
yeah.
give and take right there. So, my question is, how did you get involved in the world of acting, and how did you get on this project?
Well, if I'll just go back a little bit. My original kind of focus when I was young is I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That
Wow.
was kind of like as a kid, I played a lot of baseball and I wasn't bad at it. And I thought, well, maybe this is the way through. And then when I was 12, 13, going on I got tuberculosis. And the doctor said you can't play any sports for X number. I had it in my kidneys, actually, not in my lungs, but in my kidneys. And so there's a requirement that, you all of a sudden, now your health becomes a more important factor in what you're focused on. And so the two things that I was interested in, apart from sports, was the fact I was interested in music and I was interested in theater and in acting. And so initially, I pursued theater, music a little bit more. Simply, it was common around the house, and I had a lot of friends, and we were all exploring different. You've got to remember, we're talking 68, 69, 67, 68. We're all exploring being in bands, right? Everybody who was in high school probably was a part of a band or
Yeah.
wanted to be part of a band or some association with it. And so I got involved in that, and it was really through coming back off a mini tour with a band that I was in, and still coming back broke, that I decided I'm going to go have to go make some money. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to see if I can get myself into some commercials and some advertising, or get into see if I can do something with the acting. And so I started focusing much more on theater. And that's when I joined a Shakespearean theater company. They were very focused on that. And I thought I wanted to do more with the craft. I'd done it in high school, but it was really about taking it that next stage. And that was the thing that actually started to catch on. And it had reached a point where I grew up in Montreal. And so I'd reached a point where I thought I've got a couple of options here. I can either keep working or go to Toronto and work in Canada, because I didn't really have the French language that I could use to work in the industry in French. So I could either go to Toronto or I could go to the States, or having been born in England, I could go to England and I could actually, explore what was going on there. I had some family I could actually hook up with and explore what was going on in the UK, to get a taste and feel of British theater. And I was much more aware of British theater actually than I was of British television and British films. I was aware of British films, but more so, my interest really focused on theater and wanting to go and see what was going on in the theater world and see what I could explore there. And that was really how I made a transition from Montreal to the UK. And that was in January 1974.
Oh, okay.
And and I had done various, I'd gone through I used to, as a musician, I used to grab my instruments and I used to hitchhike from Montreal to New York City.
Oh, wow.
And I used to do it in the winter time as well. And I used to meet so many interesting people. I mean, there was one place stop along the way where it was Howard Johnson's, I think, on the off the highway. And the manager, I'd show up really late at night after having hitchhiked down there on my way to New York. And he'd always say I could sleep on the couch in the Howard Johnson's, for the
Oh,
night. Yeah, I
wow.
mean, it was these are. I mean, I don't think many people do that now. I don't know, and
Yeah,
and then I
probably not.
yeah.
It's definitely a different time.
Yeah, and and I'd end up in New York and ended up busking in Greenwich Village. I used to busk in Washington Square Park. Yeah,
When it comes
yeah.
to the world of entertainment, New York is one of the big ones. So, what did it feel like seeing and being in New York for the first time?
That was awesome. That was just. I remember going. I think it's the Tappan Zee Guernsey Bridge. That was the bridge that the 90s, the highway runs over into New York,
Yeah.
and that was just awesome. That was just the energy of New York. Even when I go back to New York now, there's an energy in that city. And people say a lot of things about New York, but New York has a real positive energy to it.
Yeah.
It is a real, obviously it's everywhere in the world. It's a tough, it's survival, and getting by is always an issue. But there's an energy and an excitement about New York, which is, I always find revitalizing. It's, and I think what's interesting, New Yorkers know how to laugh. They really know, you know, they know how to have it's not about having a good time, but it's enjoying themselves and you don't have to go over the top to enjoy yourself. It's just enjoying in being with other people.
Sure.
Yeah, and in New York, you got it. You got a lot of people.
A lot of people, yeah, just walking down the
Yeah,
street, see it. It's a
yeah,
big feel
yeah,
for sure. And a lot of
yeah,
the movies, a lot of the big movies take place, big scenes right there in New York City. It's always a focal point for sure.
yeah. And there's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And so, if you're ever thinking of acting, you're going to find you can go anywhere in New York, and you're going to think, I'm trying to find a character that I can hook onto for a role or something. You're going to find them in New York.
Right. Right.
Yeah, lots of
Now
characters.
let's talk a little bit about the costume. So the costume of the Sand Trooper, what was it made out of? Was it hot during the filming? And how long were the scenes, as far as the filming goes on your end per day?
Um, it wasn't. It's kind of interesting because I was hired originally as the fixer.
Yes, which
Uh,
was an uncredited role. You tell us about that as
yeah,
well.
yeah. The fixer was the role that I was cast in, and when I was called into the casting, which that was at the 20th Century Fox building in Soho Square in London, right in the center of the theater district and the film community and that. It's Washington. Soho Square is kind of like a hub. That whole area around there. There's probably about 10, 15 streets of Soho that have historically been the center of theater and film community and commercials community and television and that, and even the music industry to a large extent. And so I was asked to go along to this meeting, not knowing who I was going to meet. Um, and the building, it's a beautiful old building in Soho Square. But when you get in there and you go through security, even in those days, you went through, and then I was I was directed to an office that was basically absolutely empty except for a desk and a chair,
Uh-huh.
and maybe and another chair. It was just an office that visitors coming from out of town who were doing some interviews or films or stuff like that, or setting up something, would use. And I didn't know at the time that the film was part of 20th Century Fox. Star Wars was was on their slate. But when I went in there and I went into the room, there was sitting behind the desk was George Lucas, and that was the first meeting that we had. And that was basically a meeting more than an audition. It was a conversation and about what I'd been doing, etc., and my background and things like that, and what my interests were. And then we looked at the script and that. And it was about 2 weeks later or so that my agent called and said, they want you to play this role of fixer. And I agreed to do it. And then I got sent the screenplay and the 2-page agreement that they were using in those days. And that's how it started. And once you sign on for something like that, especially if you've got a speaking role or a role that you are, especially also if you're going to be traveling to a foreign land, you are, because we're going to be going to Tunisia, you have to go through a medical for the insurance purposes. So I went along to, there's doctors that they have that specialize in that, and you go along to their suite and you do a medical and you clear that, and then you you start the wardrobe process. And that's where I discovered that George Lucas doesn't know how to make shoes. Fixer's boots or what he's wearing, right?
Ah, okay.
It was the idea of George Lucas, but basically it was 2 pieces of wood with some leather around it.
Right. My
Anyways,
goodness.
that's something you just deal with as an actor. You kind of, what, the costume doesn't fit, doesn't matter, it'll be okay.
Right.
Um, and so after, that process then starts because you're now working up towards the actual agreements, etc., where you're actually going to be going on location, you're going to be filming. There was no script readings or anything. Everything was done on, basically handled on location, on set. There was no table read. I mean, sometimes you get that where a group of actors will sit around a table and they will just read through the script and things like that. So you're flown out to Tunisia and you start to settle in. And I was very focused on the character fixer because that was what I was hired to do.
Yeah.
But it was during that period where I was waiting to do those scenes that I got called to the set and asked to play the sand trooper. Mind you, it wasn't a sand trooper; it was a trooper. Everything in the original script is just trooper.
Hmm.
There's no delineation between a stormtrooper or a sand trooper. Everybody's trooper. Yeah, it was just I think the merchandising kicked in heavily, and everything became
Different.
troopers, this trooper, that snow
Yeah,
troopers.
they want you to spend the extra money for the different kind, and
All the different configurations of what you can do with a piece of plastic. Yeah.
right, exactly. Now, how was the
Yes.
camaraderie on the when you're there on the set? Did everybody get along well? Was it a nice atmosphere, or was it a stressful atmosphere?
I think I always have a nice atmosphere where because I always go with a positive attitude and I always go in with an open mind. And I also check I'm very good. I make a rule of checking my ego at the door. Right.
And
I don't
yeah,
bring it,
exactly.
because I look at it from the point of view, it's a team game.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
therefore, you're a team player, and so you're going to do your best for the team. And I've always kind of, maybe it's my sports days, I don't know, but that's something I carry with me. There was tension, but the tension wasn't with the actors or anything like that. There was tension between the crew and George Lucas, and I think some of that was revolved around um, possibly discussions between Gil Taylor, who's the cinematographer, and George Lucas. You have to remember, for a lot of the UK crew, nobody had ever heard of George Lucas before.
Right.
This is a young director coming out of the States, right? Who to them didn't have any track record because American Graffiti hadn't been released in the UK yet. Everything, today everything transfers around the world really fast. In those days, it could take 4 months, 6 months for a film, celluloid film, to actually transfer across from the States to the UK. And so not many people were aware of American Graffiti. And a lot of the crew, they had worked with some of the greatest. The crew had worked with Stanley Kubrick. The crew had worked with David Lean on Lawrence of Arabia. These guys had, they had a lot of badges.
Yeah.
The technicians, and that's what you want. You want the guys who know their shit. You don't want, you're spending money, and if you can encourage them to come along in that. And so a lot of them were following, you as you can appreciate, you get different camps. And I think because they didn't know George Lucas, a lot of them were following the Gil Taylor camp, being the cinematographer who already had a huge track record, who was well known. And some of them I'm sure had worked with Gil Taylor before on The Omen, for instance, or one of the other films that he'd worked on. And so one of the things that I think probably was a little bit awkward is the fact that George is not a big sharer of information,
Hmm.
and not, he's pretty quiet guy. He's pretty reserved. He's not about to tell you everything that's going on, etc. And that. And I think on a film, you kind of need to incorporate everybody. You need to, again, like I said, it's a team game,
Yeah.
and you want to make everybody comfortable and feel that everybody's on the same team.
Yeah.
And so there was I think probably what was happening, and there's a bit of a Gil Taylor camp and a George Lucas camp in that, right? And that's hard to manage, especially on location.
Now,
That
did he come off friendly in that initial conversation that you had? Was he a nice enough guy?
he seemed okay. Yeah, I mean, I didn't, like anything directors tend not to give too much because what they're doing is they like a lot of directors like to sit back and see what you offer.
Right.
They want to watch because what they're doing is they're seeing if how they get along with you, or how what your quirks are. They're looking at it from a cinematographic point of view, but they're also listening. They're listening to your voice. They're listening to your cadence, your things like that. And so one of the things is the fact that you don't really get that close to directors. It's very unusual. For instance, today, years ago, when if I would go for a casting, I often would be meeting the directors. There are a lot of times now people don't actually get in to meet the directors. The casting agent does it, or it's all by video.
Yeah.
They do a video audition, they get sent in, and then they either get hired or they get rejected, or they go into another list, it's a standby list and things like that. Whereas, unfortunately, in the 70s, it was very much, and even into the 80s, it was very much about going in and meeting people. I remember I went in, and it was very funny. It was 1981, etc. And my agent said, "You want to go along to this casting in Chelsea, in London?" And so I said, okay. And it was for a film, right? And I got there, and the woman who greeted me was Marion Doherty, one of the most famous casting directors out of Hollywood. And she said to me, she said, come on and meet Warren and Diane. And I go, I was not really aware of what, and it was Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so it was like, it was just one of those things. And so we sat down, and he had a cottage in Chelsea and stuff like that. And he was doing, personally, he was actually meeting the actors and stuff like that, and having a chat with them. Yeah. And he actually phoned me at home when he gave me the part, which was kind of interesting.
Wow.
Because you don't, somebody like, you get the phone call and you don't actually believe it's them, right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
think it's a friend, playing tricks on you or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
So
nice to be
I've
as
had,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
No, so I've had that experience. I know it's that kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You've experienced that in person. I mean, it's nice 70s and 80s, like you said, being able to just experience it all in person and having that
yeah,
one-on-one, it makes such a difference, I think,
yeah,
as opposed to what they're doing today for sure.
yeah. I think it's, there's a couple of things about the process that has drastically changed. One of the things was directors used to shoot a film and then have a couple of weeks where they could, decompress,
Right.
because it's a hugely stressed, and then they would go back, and then they would want to go in and start the post-production editing phase and see all the material. Today, I don't know how many directors actually get to see all the material, because the material is being shipped back to the editing suite somewhere in post-production, and they're already cutting it into a trailer, or they're cutting it into something. And so it's like the executive producers and the producers especially on the studio system, have way more control. I mean, you're never going to, it's very rare that you're going to get the final cut, but a lot of directors would at least like to see the material and see whatever's going on and things like that, and be able to have, to know what they're missing out on. Because there are times when a film is being shot, there might be a moment when somebody looks away and looks back, or just drops a word or something like that, and that can be a magic moment when you're editing.
Right.
You can go, I could have used that if I'd put it in there. And I think films today are edited too quickly. I think the post-production phase, in terms of just this, what you would consider a drama or anything like that, is too hurried. Because I think more time needs to be spent in understanding the story and making sure that you've got the story right and things like that, and not just filling the film with explosions and things like that, thinking the audience is just going to buy that.
Yeah, you got to have a story to it. You have to. It's got to make
Yeah,
sense.
you've got to have characters that people can either identify with in one way or another, and you've got to have a story, and the story's got to hook you.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
as the fixer, you had some filming with Mark Hamill. What were your
yeah.
interactions with Mark like?
It's funny. Mark is very funny. We had some laughs. Yeah. First night I met Mark was at the bar in Tunisia, at the hotel in that. And Mark turns to me and he says, the land speeder costs more than I'm getting paid."
Right. And he went on to be the voice of the Joker, so you could tell he's got quite the personality.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually thought Mark could have done a lot of comedy. He could have done, he could have broken out and just got, picked up more comedy roles and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's got a
Any
good sense of humor. Yeah.
any of the other cast members stand out that you had interactions with?
Yeah, I mean, Koo Stark and I are still in touch. We've got some legal things going on, so we're still very much in touch. And Garrick Hagan, I've been on 4 or 5 productions with Garrick over the years, different television series and films and things like that. And Garrick and I have often seen each other if we're attending a convention. Sometimes we show up at the same convention and that. Yeah, so these relationships for me go back 40 years or more.
Yeah.
It's like we're 45 years and that. So it's nice to have to, because the film industries can be very fragmented.
Right.
You go in, you do the job, and then you might never see those people again, or run into them again and things like that. It
Yeah,
can be
it's
very
nice.
fragmented. Yeah,
Nice to keep
yeah,
those relationships alive.
yeah. And it's also, it's one of those things that there are, I got with Star Wars. I was very lucky to have that scene with Sir Alec Guinness, and it was As a young actor, that's, it's a great moment to be able to play a scene with somebody like Sir Alec.
And what was he
Yeah.
like?
Oh, great, great. I have to say, he both on the screen and off the screen, he's a Jedi.
Ah,
He's
yes.
he's really he really is. He's definitely got that kind of. He's got. It's not even an aura. He's just got that steadiness. That calm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Such a talented man.
Talented man, incredibly wise about performance, understanding what that scene needed, understanding the cadence, the pace, you know, understanding what needed to be brought to that scene to make it special.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. I was, it's one of those things where you have that moment where you're working with a master, right? And they're allowing you, to do your thing. And they're also recognizing, I'm pretty sure he recognized, because I met him years later. I was doing a TV series and we were both in the same studio in outside, just a small studio just outside London. He was doing Tinker Tailor, I think, and I was doing a series called Bergerac. And we ended up in the same makeup room.
Oh, wow.
And what was interesting is he was sitting there. And I came and sat down, and he immediately he said, "Hi, how are you doing?" It's like it was like, and we hadn't seen each other in years and years.
Yeah, he is a true legend, and it's just fascinating that you get to work with somebody like that. What kind of impact does that put on
Yeah,
you? What was your best takeaway, I guess, with working with him?
I think the best moment was just the simple fact of how generous he was in in the moments, and also knowing, knowing that I'd gotten thrown into that situation. And it's like anything. See, for me, that was something that happened to me quite often when I was a kid as a baseball player. I was the kid that was sitting on the bench waiting to play, and all of a sudden they needed a run, and I was called. I was the one that had to pinch hit, get in there and get a run, or get a base or something like that. So I was kind of in my mindset. I was used to that kind of situation, and that's just jump in and do it, and
Sure.
not think about it too much. Just get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as the fixer, you did some filming in that role. You worked with Mark Hamill, obviously, with those scenes. Are those scenes ever going to be seen as a special feature, or are they already on a Blu-ray or something like that? Can we
They
expect it?
are they were put out in the 1990s on a CD-ROM,
Oh, okay.
and then people picked them up. They're on YouTube. If you go to Fixer
Oh,
Cammy deleted scenes, yeah, they're on YouTube. And what happened was then they put them out on Blu-rays, and they put them out on DVD. They put them out on DVDs, I think, and then Blu-rays. And they've even put them up as bonus features on streaming.
oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. There's a bone of contention around that, which is to do with legal, but I won't get into that. But I've been learning about entertainment law, basically, and intellectual property law, which
Right.
is which is interesting. Which is when you start to delve into it, it's not so much it's a minefield, but it's something actors don't even realize is going on,
Hmm. Yeah.
and you need to protect your intellectual property. Yeah,
Right. And what are your
yeah.
what are your thoughts on in the way of acting now with AI and kind of taking over some of the human roles, which I'm completely against. What's your take on that?
I think one of the things that people first have to do is it's not so much getting comfortable with AI, but it's to by getting to understand what it is, you also understand what its limitations are.
Yeah.
And there are definitely going to be roles that AI is going to perform, but AI in a way has been performing these roles for an awful long time. For instance, I don't think there's many law firms that don't have a huge library of what is similar to AI in terms of if they want to pull up and reference documents and things like that. I don't think there's many not law, but I don't think there's many medical institutions that don't have what you would consider databases of information
Hmm.
that they can pull up when they want to research an operation, when they want to go in and see what other doctors have done when they've done certain very difficult operations and how they approached it and things like that, and what was necessary in order to achieve a positive result. So I think that there's a we're going into this whole new uh, techno phase. We've been in a techno phase for a while with the internet and things like that, but we're moving now into a much higher elevation of technologies. That one, we can either allow it to hamper us, or we can allow it in a way to teach us to become smarter and to be able to not so much shortcut things, but to be able to analyze things in a better way. I'm not saying AI does not have the answers to everything. It just doesn't, right? But it can probably right now, if you want to take a holiday, it'll probably tell you the best way to get there and all the different ways you can get there.
Sure.
It'll give you all those options, right? It'll lay out all those options, which before now we were searching on different, search engines,
Right.
and we're doing a lot more research. Whereas now you can go into an AI platform and you can say, I want to go on holiday from New York to Los Angeles. I want to drive half of it and I want to fly half of it, and it's going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does have its benefits, but I just don't like to see it overtaking the roles or any of the aspects of acting.
I don't think it's going to do that. I don't think that's going to happen in that state. It's not going to go on the stage and perform Shakespeare, is it?
And right.
I mean, yeah, somebody might say we could put that up there. I mean, but in the same way, we're still going to be needing live or human communication,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be able to replicate human emotions, basically because human emotions are so vast and wild that we can never, you I don't see AI doing a divorce scene, for instance.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
The gamut of human emotions, we've not even nailed that one yet. We're still trying to discover that. It might help us to try and, if you want to do some research into it about what other people have said about it and things like that. I think in terms of a research tool, I can see that as being beneficial.
Yeah.
And just it's like going to we used to go to the library, or I don't know if you might remember the days when an encyclopedia salesman would show up at your door, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
sell you and sell a whole. Well, my parents were they got hooked, and we had a whole set of encyclopedias all of a sudden, right?
Right.
And so I kind of look at it like another kind of an encyclopedia where you can actually go through. It's just faster and a little bit easier to access than that.
Right.
So I'm not too fearful of AI. I think there's I can understand a lot of talent because people are trying to use it for music. They're trying to use it for voiceovers, trying to use voice and things like that. But I think that in the long run, it's going to be what you would consider a fad. That it will not get up on a stage and give a concert. It will not, it will not give a performance, and it will probably, there's. I know you have AI actors that they've taken actors' images, and they've manipulated them to do it. I mean, they do it with pets as well. But then again, we were doing that. I don't remember the series of the donkey, Francis the Talking Mule.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You see, I used to watch all the old movies. So,
Yeah.
so if we go back a little bit, we had Francis the Talking Mule, right? And you've had things like that. And so, uh, yeah, you can do AI can do Francis the Talking Mule, but we've done that before,
Sure.
and we didn't end up with a million Talking Mule films.
That we know of. We haven't discovered them yet anyway. So
Yeah, maybe there are a lot of buried ones that they never released. Yeah,
that could
yeah,
be. So
yeah.
1977, Star Wars hits the theater. At what point do you realize how big of a success this is? Is it instant or does it take a couple weeks?
It takes years. I was gone on from doing Star Wars to a film called The Eagle Has Landed in the
Oh,
summer of '76, and that was an 8 week shoot, and so that was a long time. And when you're an actor, and I would imagine it's true for a lot of actors, is you do the role, right? And especially if it's a film role, you walk away because now they've got what they want, and now they're going into post-production and they're going to release the film and that, and you go on to your next job or you go on to whatever you're going to do, right? And you're not necessarily following it daily in the trade magazines and things like that, unless maybe if you're a producer, you might do that, or you're a writer. But actors, I don't think tend to follow the trades on a daily basis or see where the box office is and stuff like that. And so I didn't really. It's funny. It's not really until the 19. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until 2005, 2006 that I really started to understand. And this was again because the internet was now starting to become faster. And remember, not many people grew up during the dial-up age where you heard all these squeaky sounds coming through to get the internet, and you had to wait
Yeah.
10 minutes to get online. That's still quite recent in terms of the history of the internet. And so it wasn't until later that I started to understand just how vast and how big Star Wars had become. And that was simply by doing it was not till 2007 I did my first convention. And so it was when I went along to that, but also just before that, when somebody had said to me, "Oh yeah," and they showed me and they typed in, "These aren't the droids we're looking for," and then I saw how many, how it came up across the internet and how many times it was showing up in terms of usage and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't really been following it. I've been busy with life really, and kids and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it was not my, and I guess maybe I'm just different, but I was writing, I was doing a lot of other creative things. Because during the 1980s, I spent a lot of time. I did some film work in that, but I spent a lot of time in recording studios. I spent nearly 6 years in recording studios.
Yeah. You've been a
Where,
singer, songwriter, composer.
yeah, working as a producer mainly in those days, working with other artists. And so there was a long period when I was just doing music and very much interested in that, and not really following the film industry and what was going on. And also during that period, during especially into the 1990s, during the late 80s, I think after Return of the Jedi, Star Wars kind of dropped off a little bit. It wasn't really starting to come back until the prequels started to come into play.
Right.
So there was almost like a hiatus there, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Elstree 1976 documentary, which came out in 2015, you
Yeah.
were a part of that. What was that experience like?
That was interesting. I'd not done a documentary like that before, and John Spira, who's the director, is really kind and very sweet, and a lot of fun to be around. And it was an interesting experience because we by 2015 I'd done some events and cons and met fans and things like that, so I had a little bit of understanding exactly what the impact of Star Wars was. And it's only through doing those cons and that I understood, because I started to meet the fans, and the fans told me their stories. How it was the first film my granddad took me to, or first film I went to with my sister, or something like that. And I started to understand how it had become an emotional event in many cases, or for people, and how people had become very connected to it. And and how they knew the lines, and I always say the fans know way more about Star Wars than I do. I'm a rookie as far as the knowledge base of Star Wars. There are some fans who know it in the Bible from beginning to end.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
those conventions, what are some of the different conventions you've been to, and what would you say is your most memorable fan interaction?
The conventions I've done some of the big ones, the celebrations that are basically run in the organization itself through Lucasfilm and stuff like that. And I've done some smaller ones as well. And the most it's funny, I don't know how I ended up there. I was doing a convention. It was a Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. And I was at a table at the hotel, and I think it was the last time they were doing the Enterprise thing in Las Vegas or something. There was a period where they closed it down, and then I don't know if they did bring it back or not. And I was sitting at a table, and at the table just next to me or just opposite me was I don't remember his name. Malcolm McDowell. Not Malcolm McDowell. Yeah. He was in oh God, what's the name of the movie? Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he was and there was a Star Trek fan there, right? There was there because they most of them were there for Star Trek and that, right? But they had some other actors there as well. And this young man he was in his 20s or so, and he came to my table and he fell down crying in front of my table. And I had went around and I said, well, "You okay? You okay?" And it was because uh, the role that I played, right, was one of the best moments that he ever had with his dad going to see the movie,
Oh, yes.
right? And that was kind of like, that really that then you understand the impact that Star Wars in general, but it was that scene and that, and he saw the pictures that I had of the Sand Trooper and stuff like that, and that triggered him,
Right.
and so that was kind of it was and it was something because Malcolm said to me, he said, Star Wars does it every time. And he'd been Star Trek, right, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
there seems to be this deep, deep connection for some fans with Star
Yeah.
Wars, and many times it's to do with family and childhood and that kind of and a positive moment, the experience in their lives.
Yeah. It's passed along through many generations. That is for sure.
Yeah, I see it now, and I kind of compare it to a little bit. You're not far from Boston, I understand, right?
Yeah.
Or you're in
Oh,
Boston. So if you're a Boston fan, right? Boston Bruins fan. I'll talk ice hockey, being Canadian. If you're a
yeah.
Boston Bruins fan, right? It's like your family. Your grandfather was a fan, your dad was a fan, you're a fan, and your kids will be a fan. It's Star Wars has that kind of sporting thing where it
Yeah.
gets handed down generation after generation.
Right. Yeah. It means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for somebody who's just looking to get into the entertainment world, whether it be on the acting end or a musician, just somebody that wants to get their foot in the door? What's the best advice you have for that?
Yeah, make them come to you. Do your thing. Do what you're going to do, irregardless. Don't think about it, have no expectations. Enjoy what you're doing. Do it with some friends, right? And do it to the best of your ability and just keep doing it. And that way you're at least satisfying the one aspect when you don't have the expectations of, and you're always going to take away something positive out of it, right? And then when they and in some cases the situations come to you. Of course, you've got to go out there if you're going to go and hopefully get an agent and things like that. But I think nowadays, because we have the technology and we have the ways and means to reach people, I think we see it on a lot of the internet. A lot of you have got YouTube, you've got Facebook, you've got all these different platforms.
Yeah.
And so if you do, you could create your own community. And that way, a lot of the filmmakers out of the 70s, even I guess as the studio system started to shift, if you look at Easy Rider, that was basically a bunch of people were their own community in a way.
Yeah.
They all knew each other, and so get together with your friends and do something together that you enjoy, because you're creating memories for your as that group, right? It's like, again, it's a team sport, and so you can do that if you're interested in a play. Write a play, get the friends together, and put a play on.
Yeah.
If you want to do some act, and that's a great way to start because it's not as expensive as making it. It's filming.
True. Right.
You know, get a stage. Go back to pencil, paper, and pencil, or you can use your computer. Everything. Write a play together and just do it
Yeah.
and see where it goes. and just pursue the talent and not have any expectations about it, and then just keep working at it. And if nothing else, at the end of the day, you're going to have some great memories.
And all the different projects you've been a part of over the years, do you still have a keepsake, something that means a lot to you that maybe you've kept from one of your projects, or whether it be a poster or a prop or anything, from one of something you've been a part of?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think now. I'm not being a big collector. I mean, I know of memorabilia or anything like that. Yeah, there have been a few things that I've had, but they all seem to disappear over time, where you just kind of, they just kind of, oh, where did that go? I don't know. I left it at that other house or something like that, or one of the kids has it or something. I don't know. Yeah, there hasn't really been a lot of stuff like that. There's it's more the memories and more the yeah. Fortunately, when you do film, it's all there.
Right.
It's captured. It's like a photograph or something. It's that moment is captured and it's there. And so, but I think, yeah, keepsake. No, I don't know where my original Star Wars script is. I do have a book from Star Wars that was given to the actors on the first film, and that's a book of photographs. And then the back of it, it's signed to me, to Anthony Forrest. Thanks for helping in the making of Star Wars, George Lucas and Gary Kurtz.
Oh, wow, that's a great
Yeah,
piece. Yeah.
yeah.
So there
So
you go.
it was,
Fantastic.
yeah, yeah. I've still got that. It's not in great shape, but I've still got that somewhere. But I don't think that. Yeah. So you asked me if I got a keepsake. What was the other part of it? You,
Um, well, that was pretty much it. Something that you've kept from any of your projects over the years. Whether it
yeah.
be a poster or but yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah, yeah. I think I still got the earrings I wore in a film once, The American Way with Dennis Hopper.
Oh yes.
I was playing a Vietnam vet, and I had these earrings in that. I think I've got them still somewhere.
Wow, that's cool. Dennis Hopper, how was
Yeah.
he to work with?
I didn't work any scenes with him, but I went to I did meet him. I think Dennis Hopper is just one of those. He's what for me. He was just lovely because he's so surprising in his performances. Right.
Yeah,
Where it's you just get all of a sudden, it's going to break out with something. It'll be a quiet moment, and then all of a sudden, just a flash.
yeah,
In many cases, it's just a flash of magic that you're least expecting.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
he's
think that's yeah. That I think it's that search for honesty in his performances that
right.
I really like.
Now, how about
Not
Anthony
holding.
Daniels working with Anthony? Have you any memories?
No, I mean I didn't have much interaction because when you're in costume like that. And he was heavily in costume, and they were obviously trying to make sure that he was taken care of because that's a very, very awkward costume to be in all day.
Yeah,
So I didn't have any real scenes except the scene where he's at the back of the land speeder. Um, so there wasn't much interaction in that respect. And I've seen him at some conventions, and that we were at the same convention in Japan years ago, and Mark was there as well. It's yeah, it's filming is a funny thing is in the sense that you film and you're all very close unit for a very short time and all of you everybody disappears and you never you don't necessarily hang out again or Garrick who played Biggs. I know Garrick quite well because we've done these 4 or 5 productions that we've both been on
yeah.
different shows, so yeah.
Then you participated in La Femme Nikita on the USA Network.
Yeah,
What was that experience like?
it was cold. We were filming in Toronto and it got really late. We went into about 3 o'clock in the morning filming.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was a cold shoot. Yeah, it's in the winter and it was cold. And we were in like kind of this warehouse space. So there's no heat or anything like that,
Wow.
which is often the case. Even the James Bond film, we were freezing our asses off.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell
Because
us about James Bond.
the big 007 stage.
Yeah.
And that's got 2 water tanks that can hold full-size submarines. So you're standing in this shell of metal, and with all this freezing cold water in December. And so it was damn cold in there working in there. I remember that, yeah. And everybody was going, "Let's go back to the dressing room. Let's get,
Right.
let's get warm." It was good. I mean, Roger Moore was funny. He was very entertaining because I had a scene with him, and yeah, I've had a chance to do some scenes with some really interesting characters, wonderful actors. One of my favorite actors to actually work with was Martin Landau.
Oh, yes.
He played my father in a film called Special Magnum, and uh, and he had some great stories that he would tell me about Hollywood and his times because he went out to Hollywood with James Dean.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. He was a New York actor, and like a lot of New York actors, they wanted to make that break out of New York to see how they could do in Hollywood.
Sure.
Yeah,
Now,
and it's
obviously,
yeah.
oh, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. No, go.
Well, I was just
You
going
go.
to say, obviously, Star Wars was such a huge film, but is there a favorite, project that you've worked on over the years? You've done so many different films. What was your personal favorite?
Yeah, personal favorite. I'm gonna think about that for a minute.
Because it's not always about how big the film is; it's about the
No,
process.
no, yeah, yeah. It's about the process and also about the story and
Yeah.
the part you play. I did. Uh, I'm just trying to think now. I suppose one of the productions that I thought was really interesting, and it was really also because it's about there's an interesting process when you work for the BBC, especially back in the day. I don't know what it's like now because I haven't worked there in years, but it was Oppenheimer, the original TV series for Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And the BBC made it. It was an award-winning, it's quite an award-winning series, and it was interesting because the BBC, when they do something, they do it really well with costumes, anything like that. They try to be as meticulous as possible about getting the A, as they do in big films. But the BBC doesn't have a $200 million budget to work with, but they still do it, you know, as well as possible. What they have to work with, they're very good at. And so one of the things that was interesting is they have a coordinator they have researchers on the production. And because it was the story of Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb and that, one of the researchers was going out to the States and she was finding people who were still alive who had worked on the Manhattan Project.
Wow.
And I played Rossi Lomanitz, which is in the new film. The character is in the new film, but apparently he was very young. He was one of Oppenheimer's prize students, and he was one responsible for creating the electrodynamic firing system for the atomic bomb. He was involved in that.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it, anyways. I haven't read up enough recently to see if that's accurate, but that was what. And so she was going to the States, and she contacted me at home, and she said, "Would you like to speak to your character?" And I said, "Yeah." And so she went to Arizona, and she got me on the phone with Rossi Lomanitz.
Wow.
Yeah, and
What
I
a
thought
wonderful.
that was, yeah, and that's interesting when you have that kind of moment happen where you're on a production and you can actually, have, especially because how momentous that story is
Yeah. What
and
was
that
that
period.
interaction
That's right.
like?
It was great. I mean, it was kind of sad in a way because he'd been kicked off the project as having, if you remember in the story or what happened in reality, a lot of the people who worked at Berkeley in that were then not involved simply because of their Communist Party associations.
Gotcha.
And so that was basically, even though he was a brilliant mind and there were many, many years he never worked as a physicist again. And from my understanding, he had all sorts of jobs, working in laboring jobs, things like that. And so there's a dark side to the story. But I just thought the opportunity to actually to connect with somebody who you're actually about to play in a TV series was very interesting,
Yeah.
especially because how momentous the story is. Yeah.
And that's not an opportunity that many get.
No, no, not at all. No. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of interest, the dedication and the research that the BBC gets into when they do productions, when they do dramas and things like that. And they've produced many great dramas over the years. And what was interesting as well, I'd worked there before, and they used to have in the main building, they used to have a canteen at the top of the building. And you would go and you're working and you go up to the canteen. It was almost like the old Hollywood days where everybody, you see all these different people from different productions, all dressed in different costumes in the
Oh,
canteen.
wow.
It's like in the studio days, you would imagine, when everybody went to eat and stuff like that, they're all working on, some are working on a comedy, some are working on a cowboy film or stuff like that.
Yeah,
So it had that feel to it, which is kind of nice. Yeah.
that's great. Now,
Yeah.
you've obviously been a part of so many different projects over the years, so many great pieces. In closing, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered someday?
Oh, geez. Um, yeah, that's an interesting. Probably as a rebel. I've kind of seemed to fall into those roles quite well, and I run that through my life as well. Yeah, as a rebel in the sense that I do a lot of my writing. What I write when I write screenplays and things like that is usually I'm searching for justice, supporting the underdog.
Yep.
You know, remembering that trying to remember we don't have to be slaves to the system,
Sure.
that
Absolutely.
we can cut out on our own. It's risky, it's always a risk, but I think life is a risk, and there's no guarantees.
Right.
But I think then you can live. The idea is just to live your life well,
Yeah.
fairly and honestly, and also with humility, and show give the you know it it doesn't really cost anything to be kind,
It's very true.
you know and that's one of the things that I think is important, is the fact that to have the you know to look past the obvious, and that in that way you will see, you will get the greatest benefits about your relationships with people,
Yeah.
and also to be patient, because I've always that's one thing I'm still trying to learn, is patience.
Yeah.
We always want to go, but I think
Right.
patience is a big thing that we have to learn. That while we would love things to happen sooner or faster, over time, given the time, that while you might start something in January, it might not be for another 12 months or whatever that you start to see any fruit. And that's nature, actually.
Yeah.
Nature shows us that you got to plant it. Farmers are really good at this. They understand. They're
Yes.
patient. They're
Yeah. Some of the
incredibly
greatest things
patient.
come over time.
Yeah. And they
Absolutely.
understand you have to plant the seeds, and then you have to nurture the seeds, and you have to let it grow, and they have to wait till the fruits comes or whatever you're growing, and then you can harvest. And that takes time,
Yeah. And
and that's patient. Yeah.
how can fans follow you? Do you have a website?
I do have a website. I've got a Facebook. I think it's Anthony Forrest 94 or dot 94, which is on Facebook. And I have a website, anthonyforrest.com. And then I have another project which I do, which is kind of like a real anarchy project. It's called Anarchy in Art.
Okay.
And that's anarchyinart.uk. And I got into creating these posters, which are just kind of really off the wall. But I do them as fine art posters. So they're all done on the highest grade quality of print paper and that. So there's stuff that you could hang in a gallery, actually.
Oh, wow.
But it's taking posters, taking speech, and just using it as an exploration, as opposed to demonstrating on the streets and things like that. Demonstration through posters.
Wow. Oh, that's very interesting.
Social commentary, satire, things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have you here and talk all about your career. It's been great, and we just kind of touched the tip of it. So very excited to have you here. And thank you so much for Anthony Forrest. I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And Anthony, thank you again.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure. Real pleasure.